All right, now that we've collected all the data about the openings we want to put in our keyguard, it's time to begin the design. I've got two windows open here. I've got freeform keyguard.scad opened up in OpenSCAD, and I've also got data.scad opened up in Notepad++. As I mentioned in the text here, both data.scad and freeform keyguard.scad need to be in the same folder for you to see the kind of behavior we're going to see here in a minute. All right, so this is what the data file looks like to start with. There are some instructions at the top, some description of what all these columns mean, and then there's the actual data that drives which openings appear where and how big and in what size. So this first column ID is your the ID of the hole, the opening that you identified back when you said I want this particular opening to be opening number 1. This is just so we can keep track of which row in the data corresponds to which opening on the screenshot that you took and marked up. So there's one row for each of the openings. Each row is contained within these square brackets and has a comma at the end, except for the last one. That's one thing we're going to have to make sure we maintain throughout here with whatever we do. Anyway, each column is defined up above what it means. And before we get into that and start entering any data, let's go ahead and define the basic aspects of our keyguard. So we'll go back to OpenSCAD and we'll use the customizer pane over here to start entering information about our keyguard. It will be for an iPad mini, so I don't need to change anything here. It'll be in landscape mode. Doesn't matter what I put for display home button or display camera, because that portion of the keyguard is going to be cut off by the size of the opening in the case. Don't need to do anything else here. My tablet case is that blue one that I showed you in the previous video. And so I'm going to say, yes, I do have a case. The opening in the case is 121 millimeters high, and it is 161 millimeters wide. There's lots of extra space around the outermost openings that we're going to put in this keyguard, so we don't have to compensate for how tight the opening may be to the screen itself. Keyguard info is a single item. How thick do you want this keyguard to be in the end? I'm going to just take it down 1 millimeter so it's not quite as thick. What is my mounting method? Well, we're going to use raised tabs. And I need to provide some information about my raised tabs. The raised tabs will be 9 millimeters high. They'll be 25 millimeters wide. These are all measurements I took from the case. And I'll leave it at 3 millimeters thick. Now here's some other information we need to gather. So we'll skip this one for now, this trim to the screen, until we get around to actually needing to do something with that. But I'm going to use the measurements I collected when I was measuring the screenshot within Microsoft Paint. And all those measurements are in pixels, so I'll just leave this as pixels. If I were using measurements I took from the app when it's running on the tablet with my ruler, I would choose millimeters instead. But I'm using the ones I took from the screenshot. Microsoft Paint insists that all measurements start in the upper left-hand corner. That's where 0 is, so I'll leave this at upper left. When I took measurements from the running app, I used the lower left instead, but I want to be consistent here with how I actually took those measurements. The screenshot that I used was 768 pixels high, and so I'll leave that at this value. Which value you choose depends on the size of the screenshot you were using when you did your measurements. This value here is only meaningful if you are using pixels as your unit of measure. If you measured in millimeters from the running application, then the program isn't going to pay any attention to what you put down here. Okay, so we'll leave those where they are right now, and let's take a look at our key guard. So it's not very pretty, but it has all the major aspects. It's the right size to fit within the case opening, and it has raised tabs of the right width and height and thickness. And now it's time for us to put some holes in this. So we'll go back to Notepad++, and we'll start to enter data that we collected earlier. So opening number 1, according to my data, again in pixels, was 19 pixels from the left edge of the screen. And I'm just going to do some deleting of spaces to keep these columns aligned with their labels above. It was 179 pixels down from the top. That was the lower left corner of opening number 1. It was 985 pixels wide. And 145 pixels high. And the shape is a hot dog. So if I look up here in the shape column description, it says if the shape you're opening is a rectangle, then you put R here in quotes. If it's a circle or a hot dog, you put CHD for circle hot dog in that space. The program is smart enough to know that if the height and width are the same, it's just going to create a circle. If the height and width are not the same, then it's going to create a hot dog shape. Well, our height and our width are not the same, so if I put CHD here, and then do some deleting to line my column again, then we should see a nice hot dog appear at the top of the key guard. All I need to do at this point is save the file by clicking on this button right here, and when I go back to OpenSCAD, I'll see that that opening has been now cut in our key guard. So I get immediate feedback as to, is that where I thought it was? Is it about the same shape and height and width as I thought it would be? If it's someplace entirely different, if it doesn't appear at all, well then you'll need to do some troubleshooting, either the numbers you put in, or maybe you didn't put these two files in the same folder. So keyguard, freeform keyguard.scad is going to look in the same folder for its data. All right, so let's go back and let's enter another row of data. So item number 2, that's our little up chevron, and it is 22 pixels from the left edge of the from the left screen edge. It is 238 pixels to the bottom of the space I wanted to set aside for it. Then I said I'm going to open up something about 100 pixels wide and 50 pixels high for it. And I'm just going to leave this as a regular old rectangle at this point. Let's save it. Let's go see if it's where we would expect it to be. Go back to OpenSCAD. Okay, that's looking about right where I expected it to be. So everything is looking good so far, and we're just going to repeat this process with every one of the openings for all 18 openings. Now, I'm not going to take your time up to do that slowly by hand, so I'm going to pause this video and we'll come back when I've got all the data in. All right, I've entered all the data for all 18 openings, and because this is just a text editor, I could take advantage of things like, oh, a lot of these lines look exactly the same. I'll just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, or paste, 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 and then just change the data item that's different from one to another. Saves me some time editing. I do have a few different shapes here. Some of these will be either circles or hot dogs, depending on whether the height and width are the same. Since these heights and widths are all the same, they'll be circles. All right, so let's take a look. After we save, let's take a look at what all our cutouts look like. All right, all 18 holes are here. All of them look like I would expect them to look. And I think we're ready to do a test of this layout against our actual app. There are one of two ways to do that. We'll either save this design off, and print the first few layers on the 3D printer, and then we'll compare those first few layers to the actual opening in our case with the app running. Or we will do some magic here and compare this layout here in sort of image form or picture form to our screenshot. But we'll do that in the next videos.